The hallway went silent the moment the general raised his hand to his brow. Nurses froze mid-step. Doctors who had laughed at her only minutes earlier stood with their mouths open, unable to process what they were witnessing. A 3-star Marine general, soaked from the rain outside, was standing at full attention, saluting a woman in wrinkled blue scrubs carrying a torn canvas bag, a woman half the hospital had spent years quietly dismissing as nothing more than the strange, silent doctor who never spoke about her past. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet strength of people the world overlooks, hit like on this video, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs a reminder that judging too fast can cost you the truth, and subscribe to Midnight Tales so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Her name was Dr. Elena Voss, and for 6 years she had worked the trauma floor of a mid-sized city hospital without ever once mentioning where she came from. She arrived early, left late, and spoke only when medically necessary. She didn't attend the holiday parties. She didn't join the group chats. She ate lunch alone in the stairwell, reading nothing, staring at nothing, as if she were somewhere else entirely. The younger doctors found her unsettling. The nurses found her cold. And 2 residents in particular, Daniel and Marcus, had built an entire reputation on being the golden boys of the emergency department, sharp, confident, adored by patients' families for their charm, while treating Elena like a relic nobody had bothered to replace. They called her the ghost behind her back. They mimicked her flat voice in the break room. When she moved through a trauma case with brutal, wordless efficiency, snapping orders in short bursts, hands steady even when blood soaked through 2 pairs of gloves, they whispered that she must have gone to some backwater program, that her calm was just a lack of feeling, that a real doctor would show some emotion when a patient's heart stopped on the table. They never asked why her hands didn't shake. They never asked why she could look at the worst wounds a human body could survive without flinching. They only asked why she was so strange, and they decided the answer was that something was wrong with her. What none of them knew, what she had never told a single person in that building, was that Elena Voss had spent 4 years of her life in forward surgical units near the front lines of some of the most brutal deployments of the last 2 decades. She had operated in tents shaking from artillery fire. She had held soldiers' hands while their blood pressure crashed, whispering to them not because protocol required it but because it was the only mercy she had left to give. She had lost patients on tables built from folding cots, and she had saved men doctors twice her age said couldn't be saved. She left the military the way many people leave the deepest parts of themselves, quietly, without ceremony, carrying the weight alone because she believed no one back home would understand it, and worse, she believed no one would want to. So she rebuilt her life in silence. She took the civilian job. She wore the same expression whether she was suturing a child's arm or calling a time of death. She let people believe whatever story was easiest, because the real one hurt too much to tell, and because some part of her had decided that if she just kept her head down and kept working, kept saving lives one at a time, it wouldn't matter what anyone thought of her. But the mockery wore on her more than she let herself admit. There were nights she sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, engine off, hands on the wheel, replaying the sound of Daniel's laughter after she left a room. There were mornings she almost didn't walk back through those doors. She had survived things that would break most people, and yet the small, constant cruelty of being underestimated by people who had never bled for anything in their lives was its own particular kind of exhausting. Everything changed on a Tuesday soaked in rain, the kind of storm that flooded the ambulance bay and sent staff scrambling with mops and warnings about the slick floors. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside, lights flashing, and before anyone understood what was happening, hospital security was waving through a man in a formal Marine dress uniform, ribbons lining his chest, rain darkening the shoulders of his jacket. He asked for her by name. Not Dr. Voss. He asked for Doc Voss, the way soldiers ask for the person who once held their life together with nothing but steady hands and refusal to give up. Word spread through the department in seconds. Nurses peered around corners. Daniel and Marcus, who had just finished mocking her cadence to a group of interns near the nurses' station, turned to see what the commotion was about, expecting some mistake, some confusion that would resolve itself. Instead they watched a decorated general stride down the hallway with purpose, stop directly in front of the quiet, unimpressive doctor they had spent years underestimating, and raise a slow, deliberate salute. He told her, in a voice that cracked despite his composure, that he had never forgotten her. That 11 years ago, in a surgical tent that shouldn't have had the equipment to save anyone, she had kept him alive when 3 other doctors had already written him off. That he had spent every year since trying to track down the surgeon who refused to let him die, and that when he finally found her name on a hospital roster 3 states away, he had gotten on a plane the same day. He told her that men under his command still spoke her name with reverence. That some of them credited her, quietly, privately, with the reason they got to watch their children grow up. The hallway that had laughed at her hesitated to breathe. Daniel felt his stomach drop as the memory of his own mockery replayed in his mind, suddenly unbearable. Marcus stared at the floor, unable to look at either of them. The nurses who had whispered about the ghost now understood, all at once, exactly what silence like hers usually means, not emptiness, but a person carrying more than anyone around her could imagine. Elena didn't cry, not at first. She simply reached out and returned the general's hand with both of hers, steadying it the way she had steadied his body on that table over a decade earlier. It was only when he said her name again, softly, almost like a prayer, that something in her finally broke open, not from weakness, but from years of being unseen suddenly giving way to being, for the first time in a long time, truly known. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that the quiet ones around you might be carrying entire histories you'll never see unless you take a moment to look closer, please take a second to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. It helps this channel more than you know, and it helps keep stories like Elena's alive. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in that hospital. Daniel found himself lingering by her side during difficult cases, not to prove anything, but because he wanted to learn. Marcus began asking her real questions, the kind meant to understand rather than mock. Nurses who once avoided her now saved her a seat. Elena didn't become a different person overnight, she was still quiet, still economical with her words, but she no longer walked those halls feeling invisible. She had spent years believing that no one would understand where she came from, and it took one rain-soaked afternoon, one salute in a crowded hallway, to prove her wrong. Before we close this story, I want to ask you something. If you have ever been underestimated, misunderstood, or mocked by people who had no idea what you were carrying, write one word in the comments below, the word seen. Let this community know how many of us have felt exactly what Elena felt, and let's remind each other that we are never as invisible as we think. If this story touched your heart even in the smallest way, please don't scroll past without hitting like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to Midnight Tales. These stories only reach the people who need them most when you help share them, and every single one of you sharing this today might be the reason someone else decides to keep going, to keep believing that their quiet strength will one day be seen. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.